Thank you for joining us for the next episode of Checked Out, the official podcast of Lancaster Public Library. I'm Theodore.
And I'm Amanda.
And we thank you for this, our 5th episode, for the support that we've gotten from all the listeners on all the different platforms on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. So we're back again, and it is soon to be Valentine's Day. And so a coworker of ours thought that the two of us who read absolutely no romance should read a slightly spicy romance book. So we'll chat about that.
I think her exact words were, it would be kind of fun to watch you squirm. So
yeah, and I definitely squirmed as I was reading it. And we got to talk a little bit about it just as we were preparing for this episode. And it's not all bad.
Nope.
We're finding the positives in it. But it was
an interesting experience.
An interesting experience.
I'm excited to get into it then.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. But of course, we do always start each episode with the books that we're reading now. So Amanda, what do you have right now?
All right. Usual routine. I have nonfiction and fiction going at the same time. Nonfiction this time around is called 18 Tiny Deaths by Bruce Goldfarb. Okay. This is the story of Frances Glessner Lee, who is often called the mother of forensic science. Okay. So she came from a wealthy upper-class family. She was always very artistic. She was interested in the sciences. But the path to becoming a doctor at Harvard Medical School, like her brother, was not open to her. And all of these elements of her life eventually came into giving her that title of the mother of forensic science through the work that she did to further that field in the U.S.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The title here coming from eventually she made models of crime scenes of deaths that were used to train medical staff, law enforcement, so that they could observe the scene of a crime with everything from the tiniest detail, labels on a can, handwriting on a letter, being absolutely perfect so that they can try to deduce how the person in the miniature scene died and take that out into the real world.
That makes a lot of sense.
So fascinating to read about this figure. I mean, I love reading stories of women in history who have been overlooked and their important contributions. But yeah, Frances' story is just so fascinating. I love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And when did that come out? Do you happen to know?
Ooh, publication date, I think it was in the last few years, 2020.
So it took quite a long time for that story to get out as well.
at least the published version here. But so good so far.
Very nice.
Highly recommend.
That sounds fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting topic. I mean, I feel like this time of year, forensic science, crime podcasts, things like that, typically are the vibe. So I think learning a little bit about that would be fantastic.
Especially a few months ago, I had read The Five, that account of the women killed by Jack the Ripper. And it's interesting to, now this is in the US, but they do talk about European models of things, pioneers in the UK as well, of,
that makes sense.
Just decades later, the advancements we had made, and advancements being made by another woman, of we know so much more about forensics and we're able to get justice for so many more people now through work by people like Frances.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good.
Great.
I like it.
Okay. And then fiction is The Pool of the Stars by Emma Donoghue.
Okay.
And this is about a nurse midwife on a ward for the pregnant women with influenza during the 1918 pandemic of the flu.
This entire thing is on brand for you.
I know. This book was made for me. Yeah. Call the Midwife is one of my favorite shows.
Yes.
I love anything by Emma Donoghue. I loved The Wonder. That was one of my 5-star books. But this is excellent. Set in Dublin over the course of 3 really long days, about Nurse Julia and the rest of the staff that intersect with her, of trying to handle all of the chaos within the hospital that's short-staffed and overrun with patients, and the really unique ways that the flu affected, the pregnant people on her ward, and some of the tragic things that happened to her patients in the time that she's caring for them. But yeah, highly recommend this one too. Love it so far.
And I assume something like that too is at the very least inspired by things that were happening in that era.
Yes. Yeah. So. Definitely intersects with some of the nonfiction I've read of, you included that clever detail that you've definitely lifted from real accounts from real midwives. So yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting.
Great.
All very on brand.
Yeah. I know. I did not branch out in my reading this month.
No,
but,
okay.
So what about you?
Yeah. Kind of didn't branch. Well, okay, I guess technically I branched out.
Do you have 2 books
I
going
have 2 books. Okay, so it's kind of an interesting thing. One book, I had mentioned this to you that I was reading. I actually finished it. It's not in progress technically, but my wife randomly, it was either at a thrift store, flea market, something like that. She knows that, oddly enough, I know I don't look like it or read like it really either, but I really enjoy football.
Food.
I know. And I really like John Madden. He's just a guy that, who doesn't like John Madden? He's just a funny, goofy guy, or was a funny, goofy guy. And so at one point she picked me up this, it's an autobiography from 1984. Now this is just stream of consciousness.
The cover alone.
It's amazing.
I love it.
It is very on brand for him. Now he's got help from a sports writer, obviously, but really I picked it up finally because I was sitting at home and I wanted something kind of fun to read, something that I knew I would breeze through quick. And also, I knew there was going to be some good stories in there from an era of football that I'm not familiar with because I wasn't alive. And it fully delivered on that front. Like, Madden's always kind of been known for, like his Maddenisms and his simple way of showing people and explaining to people the sport of American football, which, again, it's not the most complicated thing in the world, but he's a big reason why it's so popular. And also he's just a good dude. Like in one part of the book, he talks about how he left coaching because he started to realize that the players themselves, like as human beings, their feelings, their injuries, things like that, were not really considered or taken seriously by, the other coaches, the GMs, the owners of these teams. And when he realized that, his own conscience couldn't really reckon with that anymore. He knew it was just time to go. And he was only in his 40s. He got his first head coaching job at 32. So he was a young dude. But then there's also just some fun stuff. Like he learned in a child psychology class in college, one of his things that he talked about for how he coached, his players was people in a group. Again, bear in mind, he was in college in the 60s or the 70s. So,
things have changed a little since then.
That he was told that in a group, humans will act, they walk like children. They will act a little, they will react a lot more poorly. So he realized that when he had his players in a group, he needed to be very clear with his directions. He needed to be honest. He needed to be very transparent. And then if he had something very difficult to discuss, to pull an individual aside. And I was like, that's actually like a little nugget of wisdom from good old John Madden here. So that was my, I guess, technically nonfiction book. He's a real person. Then, again, because we read a book that I'm not usually a reader of, I needed a bit of a palate cleanser.
Something familiar to bring you
cozy.
back to solid ground.
Ursula K. Le Guin is just a national treasure. But oddly enough, beyond The Left Hand of Darkness, I have not read a lot of her work. That's one of my favorite books of all time, but I haven't read any of the Earthsea stuff. I didn't read her as a kid. And my wife had actually picked this up a few years ago and read it herself, and she has talked about it a ton. And it's a science fiction book. It's Ursula K. Le Guin. So you kind of know what to expect, but in general, there's a character. His name is George. His dreams impact the real world, and the psychologist he goes to deal with it uses that for nefarious means, if you will.
Intriguing.
Yeah, exactly. It's very well written, short, pretty much a novella. But I needed a palate cleanser of this just because the writing style is so familiar, so so very, very different than what we were reading. She's just so concise, so to the point. Not super poetic like some writers, but I love how she can say so much with so little. So I needed a little bit of Ursula in my life. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
going
good
to have
book.
to pick that up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I've really
You know, I'm
enjoyed
a
it.
novella lover too.
Yes.
So that's perfect.
And have you read a lot of Ursula? or
No, not really.
I highly recommend her. She's a great writer. And she's a pioneer in science fiction, which unfortunately a lot of the women who were pioneers in that genre are not talked about. Somehow she snuck through, which is great. But it is a male-dominated space. And oddly enough, she is better than most of them. So check her out.
Very nice. I will
Yes.
definitely do that. Yeah, it reminds me of Madeleine L'Engle. I'm a big Madeleine L'Engle
Okay, yeah,
fan,
yeah.
and I'd be interested to read more of Ursula's work and kind of compare
Yes.
the two, because I do see Madeleine as a pioneer in science fiction too. Some of the things that she did with the Wrinkle in Time series, even
Yes.
is-
Okay.
so
I was going to say that's a blind spot until you said the title of that book. I was like, okay,
Yep.
no, it is not a blind spot. But yes.
Yep,
yeah,
all the books
fantastic.
in that series are incredible.
Speaking of titles, it's called The Lathe of Heaven. I probably should have said that up front. We'll link
All
all
good.
of that in the description down at the bottom. The John Madden book, I'm going to be honest with you, probably not in the collection. We will link similar reads. Let's go for that.
Sounds like a
Yeah,
good plan.
okay,
Yeah.
cool.
All right.
So
Does that bring us to?
I think that brings us to our very interesting Valentine's Day buddy read.
Book lovers.
That's right.
Emily Henry.
Emily Henry.
The first Emily Henry book.
I have never read any Emily Henry or any books with like these kind of covers, so this was a whole new world for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we want to even start this, Amanda?
I don't know. When we were talking before recording,
Yeah.
figuring out how we wanted to do a discussion,
Yeah.
I think maybe a productive way to go about it is to just talk about some of our likes and our dislikes.
Yes.
Like you said earlier, we're not really romance readers.
No.
I like a good rom-com as a movie.
Yes.
Grew up on them, still watch them all the time. And I don't mind romance plot lines in other books that I'm reading, especially being a big historical fiction reader. There are often
Yes.
some relationships in them.
Yeah.
But having it be the sole focus is just not usually my style. So I don't
No.
gravitate towards books like this.
I completely agree. And one other thing that we talked about is that because a lot of books in this genre, and apparently I did check because we don't necessarily know because we don't read a lot of this, she's considered like low on the smut meter.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So-
I did
and-
actually. Yeah.
yeah. And even with that, we talked about how like in other media, like whatever, it's, 1 or 2 minutes, a scene in a movie, a scene in a TV show. When I have to read pages of an encounter, I'm
a different
not sure. It's a different
experience.
experience,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if I love it. But nonetheless, there were redeeming qualities. And I don't know, would you like to kick that off? What are some things that you found that you liked about this book?
Of my limited experience with romance,
Yeah.
one of the things that I appreciated about the book was that Emily Henry was developing Nora, the main character, as a full character. It was
100%.
very much about
Yeah.
her personal growth rather than
Yes.
just pursuing a relationship.
Yeah.
And Emily Henry prioritized other relationships in Nora's life as
Yep.
part of the narrative.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just about Nora's relationship with Charlie and will they, won't they, or what the relationship with her sister and
Yes.
with, even with her mother, even though her mother had passed long ago,
100%. Yeah. She's
developing
there the
all
whole
of that.
time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that it was about Nora's journey rather than just finding love.
No, exactly. I do feel like it's almost like the romance portion, the love portion was almost a vessel for another story that she wanted to tell. And maybe an experience that she's had herself. I don't know much about her, but I know she's a year younger than me. She's 34, which kind of lines up with the age of the characters in this book. And I do wonder if it's maybe semi-autobiographical at least. Because,
Not to interrupt, but that's something that we had talked about well, I guess something similar we had talked about in pre-recording too, of it feels like Emily Henry is writing to a specific audience. She knows who her readers are, and writing to millennials who are maybe in that place of trying to pursue a career. How do relationships fit into that? Navigating family relationships as you age, of things are changing as everyone in your life is pursuing their own goals. And she's keenly aware of that, I feel like, as she's writing, and that plays into the...
Exactly. And
is
I think,
it semi-autobiographical?
No, and you had mentioned as well, I think, like, on that same point, and like all of those things, but also the more modernly accepted concept of like the single working woman, like, you know, like the person who is very focused on their career and how difficult that can be. And I feel like Nora at times does seem to feel like a bit guilty about it, not internally, but because of, you know, external forces. And I feel like that's definitely a modern not a modern concept, but a modern thing that has been reckoned with a lot more than our past generations.
Some of the flack that millennials in particular take for choosing a career over maybe starting a family, if it even is a choice, depending on their situation.
That's the thing. It's not always a choice.
And navigating that and still finding how you can have a fulfilling life, feel whole, not cave to the pressure from parents or bosses or...
exactly. Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And that's where I think I've heard from a lot of people that she's very good in this space. And I do wonder if it's because of those aspects. Again, maybe I'll give some more romance books a shot just so I can speak better on it. But I do think that she has chops as a writer. And I think she does flex them in those moments the most. And I appreciated it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What are some of the other things that you felt like she did well?
Honestly, we're kind of on a similar wavelength there because I talked about a lot of the interpersonal stuff. So a big thing that I liked the most was that interesting dynamic between the younger and the older sibling, and how in some cases the older sibling is not only becoming the parent in a time of crisis, which in this book that's what happened, but has to shield the younger sibling from all the generational trauma that they've been exposed to. So for instance, in this book, the younger sister Libby seems to really live her life like she remembers her mother, which seems to be more like the love-struck free spirit. And Nora lives her life, the older sister, like she seems to more candidly remember her mother, like the bad breakups and the illness and the failures. And I find that interesting because it does seem like it's like both parts of their mother, but the two sisters got the complete separate parts of her personality.
Yeah, and to be fair, it is clever how the author approached those different versions of the mom as told by Nora and Libby, because then you get later in the book and it's almost like their impressions of the mother were flipped. That Nora saw the real things, but then tried to, you know, paint a very good picture of everything for Libby. And Nora thought that Libby was getting the fairy tale version of mom, but then Libby brings up all of these negative experiences she remembers in her childhood that Nora thought she had shielded Libby from. She's thinking, didn't you see how incredible our mother was and how much she loved the city and all of this. So that was a very it was interesting clever choice as a writer. I did like that.
I thought it was actually really nice. I mean, I feel like by the end of the story, you really get to know these two women as like actual, like real people. They don't feel like just shallow characters. Like there's an honest backstory there that you can see, and probably anyone that you interact with, like there's a lot of truth behind that. So I did appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and talking a little bit more about the sibling relationship, my sibling and I are a few years younger than this scenario in the book, but we're very, very close, and I can relate to some of the things that with Libby and Nora, Emily Henry centered of as life's going on and things are changing and you want to stay close, but how does, you know, each of your different paths, how do they affect your relationship, and how do you, you know, hold on to each other in the same way?
Exactly. I mean, you have separate goals, you have different personalities, you have different wants and needs, and in some cases even wanting to be in different areas, like by the end of this book. But that doesn't mean that you can't keep a strong relationship. Like, you do still have to live for yourself. I feel like that's almost the entire thesis of this book, is like, you have to live for yourself.
Yes.
Because by the end of the book, like, I feel like there's probably people who thought the storybook ending would have been her staying in North Carolina with Libby, and if Charlie stayed, but she wouldn't have been happy there. It's very clear at the end of the book, when her and Charlie are talking, when he shows up in New York, that neither one of them would have lasted there. It would have been a miserable existence for them, I think. And so I feel like that's a good message as well, that like, you find ways to stay connected, but you still do have to, I mean, you have to put yourself, maybe not first all the time, but, you know, you got to look out for yourself.
No, you're right. That one of the things she did really well with the book was, if you want to call it like central themes, not to get too literary, but what is the balance between sacrifice and compromise and staying true to your own values and identity when you're trying to love another person, whether that's romantically or if it's platonic, or in all scenarios where you are trying to have a relationship with another person. How much do you bend to grow that relationship, and how much do you say, if I have to bend, then it's not for me?
Yeah, exactly. Was there anything else that you liked in particular about the book?
Oh, I do like some of the tropey elements. I feel like not fully, but I think if you're going to have a romance novel, you want some of that escapism.
True.
And I do think that the quaint little town, she did pretty well.
That's true.
It was cheesy, but it
Definitely
wasn't.
cheesy.
It wasn't some of the Hallmark movies I have been forced to watch that make me cringe in my seat because it's just so bad.
That's true. It wasn't like that throughout. There were moments of pure cringe at times, but it definitely wasn't consistent. I would agree with that. Yeah. No, I did like that too. I think the little town was nice. I feel like the cast of characters, once they got there, was interesting enough. I mean, definitely she didn't build out really any of the characters beyond the sisters and really Charlie, at least not super in depth, but they were interesting enough. It felt relatively alive. And I think that it's nice. It is nice. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to talk then about some of the things we didn't like as much?
Yeah, why not? You know what I mean? I think
we
that's
truly
what we're
are
here
trying to keep it constructive. We are not trashing romance as a genre.
Not
we
at all.
love our romance readers.
Absolutely.
This just isn't what we gravitate towards, and we're trying to approach it with respect and appreciation.
Yes. A lot of respect and appreciation.
But there are things that we just didn't vibe with.
Yes, exactly. But again, it's not, I don't think it was a bad book overall.
Exactly. Just because we didn't like it doesn't make it bad. It's just things that don't speak to us as much.
Yeah, as readers, yeah. So do you want me to kick that off?
Sure.
Okay, so this is something that you may even have this written down as well. It is the quippy writing and the wordplay. I said at one point, it reads like a Marvel rom-com. It's like everything Disney does now, like with their Marvel films and Star Wars and stuff like that, like all of that constant quippy, like one joke per 30 seconds.
Every line has to be worthy of the trailer.
Oh, yeah, and it drove me nuts. But I think the thing that drove me the most crazy was this thing that Nora kept doing throughout the book, where she would take two words and make them a single word. Like when she talks about pouting and scowling, and I think it was like scouting or something like that. And that's not for me. I'm going to tell you that much. That kind of writing in general, those kind of movies, like all the power to you, like there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I don't get much out of that.
I think that this says a lot of things about us as readers, and maybe negative things about us as readers, in a sense of when I again, this is just a general survey, but when I talk to a lot of my library pals or friends who are avid romance readers, they're approaching books wanting to feel good when they read them.
That's fair.
We read a lot of books that make us sad.
Yeah, no.
And there's room for both of them, but I think that if your goal partially as a writer is to make someone feel good about your story, and they might be picking up the book and putting it back down, you don't know what kind of setting they're reading this in.
And you
want to
definitely
pack in all of the happy and funny and really build out the character by showing you how they're thinking. And I guess Nora's character is
very quippy.
Yeah.
She's very quippy, and that's A-okay.
But yes, that was something that was a little bit difficult for me too.
It was, it was interesting. But I know I know a lot of people like that. I know it's very much like a me complaint and not a world complaint.
But yeah, valid argument of not every line has to be the line.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was trying to analyze my own feelings of, I don't know, because I was trying to put it on the same plane as, like, I love flowery language. Yeah, I love long descriptions in a lot of literary fiction of, I hear from people who don't read a lot of literary fiction of why can't they just say the door was blue?
Yes.
Why do they have to,
exactly.
take, a whole long sentence with a semicolon to just describe one thing? So why did I not like the quippiness and like overstating things in a romance novel versus the way I like to read in other literature? But I think it's just the tone of it.
It's the tone. I think it's the tone as well.
I feel like this is trying to entertain you and make you love Nora, and generally some of the descriptions in literary fiction are trying to make you see the world in a new way.
Yes.
Or evoke not just an emotion, but like something really specific in your mind's eye. And Nora's like one-liners aren't doing that. That's not their goal.
No, it's like an artistic expression versus just pure fun, pure kind of entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with either of those, but it definitely just depends.
And you can still get things out of the entertainment.
Exactly.
We took the first half to talk about some of the, deeper things that it made us feel. But
because they're absolutely, that is there. But I do think you're right, because
it's eliciting a different response.
Very much so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what was your chief complaint, if you had one?
I'm trying to decide what my chief complaint is. Not that I have a whole long list, but the quippiness.
4 pages of complaints.
The quippiness was a big one. I think that another thing that got to me was part of the plot of this is trying to subvert romance tropes.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
That Nora is the cold-hearted, city girl, and she's, not going to find a love interest because she has a checklist of.
Yes.
And this just couldn't decide if it wanted to play into the tropes or if it wanted to subvert them. I felt like every time it was trying to do something new and different, it fell back into what romance was supposed to be. So maybe I'm reading too much into what Emily Henry was trying to do.
No, I think you're spot on actually though, because it does, like, at certain points it's like a satire. It honestly feels like a satire of the genre. And then at other points, all of the tongue-in-cheek nature of it seems to fade away, and it's a genuine sappy rom-com. Mm-hmm. And that is, again, fine, but it's just odd because there is like from one chapter to the next, there could be a massive tonal shift where it's like it's very clear that she's being kind of snarky and kind of making fun of like her own genre that she works within, but then very much falling right into the tropes.
Yeah, I feel like it's either that it was a mission doomed to fail, because if you're going to call it a romance book, it kind of has to have the ending that it did. Otherwise, I 100%. Feel like it would just shift into literary fiction and be sad. Like, she was right. She didn't get the guy because she has checklists.
Yes, now it's a sad book. Yeah.
But maybe I'm just misunderstanding what she was trying to do, and it was just, isn't it a fun little thing to play with the tropes a little bit, but I'm still going to give you the happy ending you're expecting.
Could be it too. Although, like, I will say, like, at least she ended up with Charlie and not Shepard.
There are times that I think we both do. I tend to take what I call my stream of consciousness notes as I read our buddy reads,
Yeah, I've
and then
absurd
boil
notes.
them down into better ones.
Yeah.
But I think I literally wrote like rolled my eyes when Shepard took her to the house.
Yep.
he if you want to talk about tropes, he was just the like, I'm just a small town guy.
Like the wildest, like borderline offensive stereotype of guys from the South. Like it was just, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my
that was a
cup of
lot.
tea. Not Nora's either. So that's good.
Thankfully, yeah.
Exactly.
Charlie won.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think my only, well, it's not my only one, but the only other main complaint I wanted to talk about here very quickly, because we can't really dive into it, was I have never in my life read more like unsensual, sensual parts of any media in my life. The choice for naming anatomy, a lot of things. I was sitting there and I was just like, I'm falling. I was bored. Bored. Like, again, like it's not my cup of tea, but also I don't even have to tell you the two specific words that we've both laughed about a lot that are used over and over and over again. You can read it and you'll know right off the bat. And it is just, I don't understand it. I don't understand what is.
Yeah. I know. I'd be so curious to talk to true romance readers, talk about the spice level a little bit of, like we said, we know that it's not the highest that it can go. It's relatively mild.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're ever interested in the spice level of books, there's a website called All About Romance that actually gives a spice rating to popular romance books. This falls pretty low. But I think it's just in some of our discussions, if we're going to read romantic scenes, want it to be more sensual, want it to be more romantic,
100%.
not
That's the
as
thing.
just explicit. I guess it depends on what you're trying to get from more romantic scenes. And
Well, that's the thing. Like, I
it's not
feel
what
like
we were.
for me, romance is more of like a slow burn.
Yeah.
And probably sad.
Right? Yeah.
Someone dies at some point. Like that's my romance. Or it's like something like The Goldfinch, where like the love story in that, or the multiple different love stories throughout that book, they kind of ebb and flow. They come and go. They end poorly. One of them ends well, but like, again, there's a story around it, as opposed to just like nonstop romance, the constant interactions between those two characters. And it's not 100% for me, but I get the appeal because it was cozy. I will say, like, I didn't feel bad while I was reading it.
Yes.
Which is nice. Honestly, it was kind of nice. But so I do see the appeal. I see why these kind of books are doing so well. And I hope you keep reading them because it helps us too.
Oh, I don't think that our one slightly negative podcast is going to dissuade the romance readers from picking up the next Emily Henry.
No, I don't think so either. I think she has far more pull than we do. Yeah.
But thank you all for bearing with us as we did our best to read something outside our genre, you know,
And it was
expand
fun.
our reading palettes.
Yeah, exactly.
And things like this always help us give better recommendations, because the more we read, the better we are at honing in on other people's tastes when they ask for recs. And
yeah, honestly, it's a very good exercise because of that, because it is a weak spot for both of us. And so to have at least a little window into that world, I think is important, because if someone comes in asking for romance, I'm not going to push them towards what I like. That's ridiculous. So having at least a little knowledge of this genre now, I think is great.
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay. I think
I
we did fairly well.
I think we did fairly well. I am proud of us.
Me too.
All right, cool. Well, that's actually all we have for this episode. So I do want to thank you for watching us fumble through some of our notes here. I'll get rid of that now. And it's been a pleasure actually having this conversation with you about this book. It's been a lot of fun to read.
Absolutely.
So thanks for watching.
Yeah. Check back in next time to check out.
Perfect. Thanks.
See everyone.
Bye.
Bye.